So, Ben, I'm so glad we're going to talk about cricket today.
Is that a sport? You really played a type on this one. Like, I worry that that's, like, us falling into stereotypes.
That's true.
But then this one, it seems like maybe that's where we are, I don't know.
We might be. We could play a drinking game where, like, every time I mention
Do
cricket,
you
you
really
have
know
to
about
have a sip
cricket?
of tea.
But do you really know about cricket, or are you just, like, pretending to know about cricket because you know
Of
I
course,
don't
I
know
know a
about
ton about
cricket?
cricket. I'm Pakistani. I grew up watching cricket.
Alright. Are cricketers as much celebrities as, like, basketball players?
Yeah, of course.
They're all on TikTok or whatever? Not TikTok in India, actually.
I don't know. Yeah, there's no TikTok in India.
I'm Ben Smith,
I'm Nayeema Raza.
and this is Mixed Signals from Semafor Media.
Today, in the midst of the US Open, the start of the football season, and that annual battle and contract fight between Disney and DirecTV, which has resulted in some shutdowns, we're going to talk about why sports is suddenly everywhere, the money pouring in from pickleball to golf, whether anyone is actually watching, and what all of that means. And to help us figure it out, we're going to bring on John Skipper, who for years ran ESPN as the president until I think 2017.
Yeah, John now runs Meadowlark Media, and I've known him for a long time, and he's very invested in this topic, literally and figuratively. So he'll have a lot to say.
By the way, I have to say, is any of this new, Ben? Actually, if you look at the Roman Empire, which I know men love to talk about the Roman Empire, at least on TikTok,
We think about it all the time.
they invested in, the great stadiums, the Colosseum. If you look at the Greeks, how they built Olympia, this seems like the oldest media business in the world and the most successful.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, I guess it used to be kind of considered a moral alternative to war, basically. But it is in the middle of an authentic boom. There's money pouring in from lots of new sources, and people are consuming it in new ways too, particularly feeling very connected to athletes as celebrities. Even when they're not watching the games, they may be listening to the podcast, watching the TikToks.
We're going to get into what's driving all of this after the break. So, Ben, we were off for Labor Day. I haven't seen you, but you got a haircut, and it's a very nice sweater.
Yeah, it's been good. Been in New York City, soaking it up. How about you?
I've been good. I'm just back from travels. After the DNC, I went to France, and now I'm back in New York. This is the best time in New York because it's fall weather. The US Open is on. There's all kinds of sports. I think there's some baseball that you went to, right?
Yeah, like, we have I feel like basically coincidentally been doing a lot of research for this episode. Um, I don't know, I mean,
Mine's just my dating
m
life, Ben, but you
oh,
you
is that
share
why
what
you were at the Open? You don't want to elaborate on that?
not at this moment, Ben, but we'll talk about tennis. But first of all, let's talk about some baseball because you took your dad, I think, to the Mets game, right?
Yeah, it was his 80th birthday.
Oh, happy birthday.
And as you mentioned before, sports is
Mhm.
not exactly a new thing. He's been going to Mets games since 1962. Mr. and Mrs. Met came by to celebrate and got us on the Jumbotron. It was very
Wow.
exciting.
That's really nice, actually. I love that.
Yeah, it was nice. It was me and my son as well, and you do I sort of realized, like, that, these are probably in my family, which isn't religious in a particularly consistent
Mhm.
way, going to these ball games, probably the oldest tradition. It's a strange fact, but even at a moment when these things are changing so fast.
Yeah, there is something sacred about the sports space in the United States in particular, and we should talk about that. But
Yeah.
also we both went to the Open this week.
Yeah, how'd you find it?
It was good. I went to see Yannick Sinner play against Tony Paul, and I think that overhang of patriotism from the Olympics was still there because everybody, like, I always root for the underdog when I go to tennis, and yet the underdog was Yannick Sinner. First of all, because there have been so many upsets in this Open, right? But also nobody was cheering for Yannick Sinner. Nobody. It was all USA, USA.
Yeah, it's true. I actually saw Jessica Pegula beat, Iga Swiatek last night,
Oh,
and it was
yes.
sort of the same, and I sort of felt bad for Swiatek, who is, by the way, the best tennis player in the world, and she's fine.
But super boring to watch.
Yeah, and the crowd was very patriotic, very pleased to see the American win. I mean, I think, we'll get to this, right? But, like,
Yeah.
sports does seem like this place where you can have a kinda safe, unifying conversation even in the September of an election year.
Unless you're cheering for Yannick Sinner at the, US Open match.
Yeah, then watch out.
But the other thing I observed is just, like, the commercialization of every aspect of that space. Like, I think the Chase close call is the
Oh,
best advertising spot, right?
yeah, I mean, right, it's an exquisitely branded affair for sure, but Chase, IBM's Watson providing the data analysis, every single element of that is aligned with a sponsor, and the USTA is doing all right.
So before we dive in, let's actually talk about why we wanted to do this episode instead of, the 500th conversation about why Vice President and now candidate Kamala Harris is not giving more interviews to the press. Something that is actually an important topic, but not our topic today. Our topic today is sports. And my theory first was that, Ben, you're just jealous of Donald Trump's foray into the manosphere and you want to reclaim your rightful position in it. But why this, like, why now? Let's talk about that.
Yeah, I mean, this is, I guess, sort of a story I've meant to write for a long time, actually, and just really crystallized for me this summer, as it was the absolutely craziest news summer of our careers, I think. And
Mhm.
we're now in a moment when the country may be off the rails, but I think the election is sort of on rails in a certain way. And I think part of my ambition for the show all along has been that can we kind of step back and figure out some of these stories about the zeitgeist, the media, that use media as a lens into really how the world works. And this sports boom is, to me, just this remarkable thing about contemporary culture. Somebody absolutely at the center of the boom right now. I saw him yesterday. He said he thinks that sports is to this decade what celebrity was to the '90s. But there is just this ubiquity,
Except it's all twisted together, the sports and the celebrity in this case.
right? The athletes are a new kind of celebrity for sure.
But it's not that people are watching more of this. That's the fascinating thing because I have been, actually, like, this is my real touchstone to sports is that I have been recovering from an ACL injury and surgery from skiing in January, and so I went to the Knicks doctor. I train at this place where all these athletes are there, and me, and there's always ESPN on, and there's almost never actual sports on. It's all like the business of sports being covered. It's like who's getting traded to who, how much someone's getting paid, are they going to be traded? With the exception of the Olympics, where I think people were actually watching, and to some extent, I guess the U.S. Open.
Yeah, and the NFL has held its ground. I mean, the
Mhm.
NFL is an extraordinary set. 93 of the top 100 broadcasts in America are football games. And what that means is that people are watching football at about the rate they were 10, 15 years ago, and everything else has collapsed. And then there's also this huge explosion of podcasts, social media. LeBron James has a media company. JJ
Yeah,
Redick has a podcast. The Kelsey brothers have this huge show. The Manning brothers are these huge
yeah.
media figures.
Instead of wanting to put his name forward for president, Gavin Newsom wanted to have a sports podcast with Marshawn Lynch. That's what the economy is these days.
Your doctor, who probably would have called himself or herself an orthopedist 10 years ago, is now calling themselves a sports physician, I bet. But I think people are experiencing just this like weird ubiquity of sports across the culture right now,
Mhm.
and it's real. I mean, there are 26 new sports leagues in the last 10 years, including cornhole, pickleball, professional bull riding, slap fighting, but also big stuff. I mean, which may when the leagues aren't necessarily new, but the women's basketball breaking through, UFC and those sports just becoming really major parts of the culture. The extent to which people are investing in sports to buy a kind of broader cultural power cachet that spans everything from urban planning to kind of global financial power.
Yeah, and the real question here is really whether this boom, right? This boom is more driven by commerce, whether it's the supply side, whether it's the rise of these streamers, Netflix realizing it's not just a subscription model anymore, but has to advertise, and that live sports is the fastest way into that, and they're going to have an NFL game by Christmas. Whether it's this influx of money, including golf money, into everything from golf, like literally golf, or whether the boom is really this cultural phenomenon, whether it's driven by the kind of dwindling attention spans, the loneliness, the escapism, a kind of like post-COVID wanting to be together and a sacred experience of, there's no more God. And so now we all turn to sports. I'm sure in some ways it's both, but I think you fall more on the first side here, right? The commerce side.
Yeah, I mean, I think the question is, will the commerce really come through, and where is the money to be made? Because on one hand, there's so much money pouring in, like just the amount of investment going into things like pickleball, going into 3-on-3 women's basketball, going into the women's soccer team in LA that was recently valued at $300 million when Bob Iger and Willow Bay invested. There's this scale of money pushing in that is just extraordinary. And I think there aren't enough hours in the day for everybody to consume these sports. But I think what a lot of those investors are seeing at the same time is real.
Right. And so what's your theory on the commerce? What's driving this? Is it gambling? Is it the new money? Is it
I mean, I guess, yeah. I mean, I think the new there are these three big sources of money. Part of it is these new shelf space on streamers. Like, all these new channels need more stuff, and if they can target a relatively small audience with, or a big audience with cricket or with Premier League in the US. They're going to find new spaces for it. Part of it is, you know, mega rich people and foreign sovereign money that's just looking for new ways to buy influence and and to invest broadly in the culture. And the third, right, is gambling, where the money is going to wind the commerce will wind up not being about the sports, but like a couple derivatives off the sports where there are numbers flashing on the screen and you can throw money into the digital slot machine while you watch. And all of that stuff is converging right now just to create this just massive explosion of investment.
In some ways, it's like this thing that we in journalism often think about as a problem. The fragmentation of media is actually working when it comes to sports, right?
It's interesting because I think you're totally right that there's this new way to consume the sport you're obsessed with. Max was up at 7 a.m. watching global basketball in Jakarta a couple of months ago. I mean, there's just many options if you are a fan. If you want to go really deep on a sport or connect with this particular athlete. But then the other thing, of course, is that particularly in the United States, this incredibly divided moment here. Sports and particularly football are like kind of the remaining mass culture where it's
Yeah.
where people can have a conversation with each other that where the stakes are low.
I just want to, you triggered something when you said Jakarta basketball, which is that when as a kid growing up in Jakarta, I just have a memory of shooting hoops with the Harlem Globetrotters when I was a kid when they came to Jakarta. I could have been what Max was watching.
Wow, and your Achilles tendon would have been in such better shape had you kept it up.
It was the ACL, common injury for us professional athletes.
I mean, some of this right, and there's the cyclicality to it, right? Baseball, and there's the
Well, the
booms and
soft
the busts and
power,
the
right?
globalization and the commerce and the
Yeah.
incredible American soft power, right? The Harlem Globetrotters.
There's massive celebritification of sport. That's less of a business reality than a cultural reality, and that has ultimately come into even the NCAA, right? The college sports, this image likeness thing. These are cultural movements saying, "Hey, who owns who I am?" And then there's this massive kind of loneliness in America. The fact that, church membership has declined from 70% to 45% in the period, I think, between 2000 to last year. And Super Bowl viewership in that same period has just increased and increased. And sports just remain the sacred space that is inviolable from politics, et cetera.
Yeah, it's pretty remarkable. The surest way to get booed as a politician is to go throw out the first pitch in Yankee Stadium, basically. People
Really?
people do yeah, people do not like to mix it with the rest of public life. And to the degree that right, that live viewing is collapsing everywhere, the one thing left propping it up is sports because people are looking for these shared experiences. And then the other, we talked about all of the factors culturally, commercially pushing sports, pushing for there to be more and more sports. The other really big one is in the expansion of this market to include women. There was
Yes.
for most of the history of U.S. media, these were products targeted at men, and that has really changed. And like any product where you can double your market, that's a big shift that's driving some of this as well.
And Project 2025 isn't looking to claw that back, women's access to sports.
All right, Kamala. But no, but that's sorry. I don't mean to be snide there. It's actually
Yeah.
kind of interesting, right? That there is
Yeah.
this backlash against feminism that has held women's sports harmless. Actually, you really don't see
Yeah.
any Republicans, even ones who are saying we should move back to kind of more traditional ways of being. Nobody suggesting that women's sports should be rolled back.
A lot of the conversation around, trans sports and, gender identification in sports is actually about holding the line on women's sports, et cetera. You see people like Martina Navratilova and others kind of making that argument of protecting women's sports, and Republicans in small towns making that argument too.
Yeah, and whatever the sort of view, the sort of more conservative view of femininity that's emerging is, it certainly includes, really high level competitive sports. And it's a little surprising.
I think the other part of it is actually the technology itself, like at the rise of these shorter games, because cricket is actually the best example of that. Like growing up, I would watch 5-day test cricket.
I'm so sorry.
That could be 30 hours of cricket. Early in the 2000s, there was this kind of move towards 2020 cricket, a shorter format of cricket where there were 20 innings instead of the shortest 50. And then they took the European Premier League model and the Indian Premier League, IPL, came up. They got all these global players around the world to come in, and it's been a huge contributor to India's economy. And it also just makes technological sense because I couldn't imagine in this day and age people sitting down to watch 5 days of cricket. So that is a technological shift as well. But anyways, the questions here, like, is it driven by the money? Is it driven by the technology? Is it driven by the culture? Are great questions to pose to our guest who'll be joining us in a moment. This is John Skipper, former president of ESPN, and someone you, I think, know quite well.
Yeah, I've known John for a long time, and he ran really the central pillar of the whole U.S. sports thing, which is ESPN, the cable network, and all its digital assets from 2012 to 2017. Oversaw the creation of 30 for 30, the legendary doc series.
I love 30 for 30.
Yeah, and then became the executive chairman of an early attempt to kind of turn sports rights into a digital property called DAZN, spelled DAZN. I don't know about that. And now founded and heads this production studio called Meadowlark, produces sports podcasts and docs, including the Dan Le Batard show, as well as Pablo Torre, who we're fans of at Semafor. And I like talking to John about this stuff because, like anybody who's worked in that world, he's a business operator who understands that these are commodities that are bought and sold. But I find that sometimes when you talk to people in that world, it can get pretty boring because that's all you talk about. And I think that John has always understood the extent to which it's a business, but it's really rooted in these interesting cultural questions.
100%. All right, let's take a quick break and we'll be back with John Skipper.
Football season, basically the biggest thing in sports, is upon us. How do you think as a marketer about connecting with sports fans today?
I am super excited, both as a football fan and as a marketer. And let's be clear, we're talking NFL football, right?
American football. One needed to check.
NFL is really massive in the marketing world. Of the 100 highest rated broadcasts last year, over 90 were NFL games.
Incredible.
What's really interesting is how the fandom of football has become so unbelievably big. As digital technologies have changed and as we engage with the world in new and fun ways, podcasts and streaming services and all sorts of other ways, the actual game around the game in some ways is bigger than the actual games themselves. That means really speaking to the fans in their language, in their voices, and actually in their spaces without being overly intrusive. I have the advantage that we at Google have a giant partnership with the NFL. We are the sole owner of the NFL Sunday Ticket, and we're really leveraging technology to bring the fan experience to life. So there's multi-view where you can watch 4 games at once, which I love doing. I thought only young people could process that much information at one time. Turns out you can teach an old dog new tricks, myself included. So I'll be watching 4 games at once, and I'll have my laptop open, and I'll have my apps open, doing all sorts of things.
So the marketing needs to be across all these different screens and formats?
An integrated approach to marketing is authentic to that fan experience and actually makes the fans fun better versus just intruding and getting in the way of what they actually want, which is to participate in all the talk and the conversation and the winning back and forth.
And tell us where to find out more about this.
If you go to thinkwithgoogle.com, there's a YouTube culture and trends report all around fandom. Just search for fandom, YouTube, and culture on thinkwithgoogle.com. Great report covering this topic completely.
Thanks, Josh.
Ben, that is quite the handsome sweater that you have on today.
Yes.
It's laundry day, and I had a little panic here. I appreciate the compliment. Are we kind of matching?
Yeah, we're matching. That
Yeah,
was kind of the point.
Oh, I thought you were just complimenting me.
I may be technologically inept. You clearly are slightly colorblind. I think it is close to
Oh, I
exactly the
think you're
same
right. J. Crew.
bluish green that we
I know
both
the
have
J.
on.
Crew, John. I think that's where mine
Oh, I
is
think
from.
John's looks very nice. I think John's might be Brunello Cucinelli.
It's
It's Laura Piano.
You're right on your last guess. Yes.
Oh, it was Laura Piano. See, yes, there
And
you
you
go.
could buy at least
Wow.
1.5 J. Crews for that.
At least. John, lovely to have you here. Thanks for being with us.
Naima and I have been talking about the sort of big picture sports boom in the United States. How much of it is driven on one hand by basically investment, all the money flowing in from rich guys, from streaming platforms, from gaming and gambling, and then versus the demand side, versus people's connection to athletes, people's love of sports, versus all these women suddenly, becoming sports fans or starting to tune into these things. How do you see that big picture question?
Well, I see there being a confluence of factors. I think that the most important is we're at a moment which will not last forever, where everyone along a continuum of traditional media to disruptive media is finding that sports is the best and most valuable content to do what they need to do. If you are a pay television channel, you still need the sports to wring the last dollars out of the pay TV universe, which is what you see happening now in the direct TV ESPN conflagration. And then if you are NBC, CBS, you are having a moment of renaissance when suddenly, because pay TV reaches less and less of the national audience, broadcast becomes more important to sports. And if you're looking to create a disruptive streaming service, it's the best content, the most predictable content you can have to do that. So all of these big companies, they'll ultimately be consolidated, but right now they all need this content. So they're driving the rights up. You mentioned rich guys. Rich guys are driving up team valuations. Fans who mostly have little to do with this simply have an insatiable appetite for the teams and the sports they care about. So you have all those things happening at once. So there's this enormous boom of sports in the culture as a business and as a both a stabilizing and disruptive factor in media companies.
You ran ESPN, which is the most valuable part of now Disney's bundle, from 2012 to 2017. What is the biggest thing that surprises you now, 7 years later, as you look at the business and you're still deeply involved in it, of course, with Meadowlark? What is the greatest threat to an ESPN now, and what's the greatest opportunity?
Well, the greatest threat is the deep pockets of the big technology companies, right? When
Mm,
I was doing it, I had the benefit of being, and I don't play poker, so it's simply a metaphor. I had the benefit of sitting down at the table with the biggest stack of chips.
mm,
ESPN no longer sits down with the biggest stack of chips. Amazon has a bigger stack, Netflix has a bigger stack, Apple has a bigger stack. So that's their most existential threat. I think their greatest defense against that is just the volume and the length of time that they own an enormous quantity of rights. So they'll be fine. They're going to survive the disruption in ways that other people who don't have enough rights will not.
At the heart of the conversation about rights is still U.S. football. The one that's really that's propping up linear TV, and that's getting sliced and diced across these platforms right now to the great benefit of the NFL. Why is football so uniquely popular?
It's a good question. It clearly speaks to something in the American psyche. I have a new theory. Our country is all about American exceptionalism, manifest destiny, and football is a game of conquering. I am going
mm.
to start out first down, and I am going to, if I can conquer, invade, steal 10 yards of your territory, then I get to play again. And
Mhm.
by the way, football emerged, right? The big championship game happened in 1958 when the Baltimore Colts beat the New York Giants. Everybody discovered they liked this game, and the broadcasters discovered, man, we can make money on this game because every time anything happens, we take a break and we go to commercials. You can't make that kind of money on soccer. Basketball is less predictable, baseball is less predictable in a way, and it's a perfect broadcast sport. You basically play, you show that play 3 or 4 times, so you barely have to pay attention. If you miss the play because you went to the refrigerator, they show it 3 more times. It's kind of what you always did. You show the play, it lasts 5 seconds. It's 30 seconds before the next play. You get to talk about it. It's perfect for television. It speaks to our national psyche somehow. It's also ours, right? We're American exceptionalists. We think something we invented has to be better than anything else. And football somehow strikes all that notes.
This is why I love talking to you, John. And when I was selling this episode to Naeema, who's a little skeptical, I was like, no, because he can both talk about the most boring, trady aspects of the business and then immediately go deep into your psyche.
Though I was skeptical about the episode, but I think I said John's name first, actually, Ben, when we
Yeah.
were gonna do
Okay,
it.
I'm happy to be argued over. It means I'm still modestly relevant.
Do you think there are any other sports that could unseat American football? Like, obviously, global football, what is here called soccer, is actually a bigger revenue business globally. And of course, it's coming to the US in droves. Could that be the new football?
Is football going to become the new football? Because I am obnoxious since it is one of my 2 favorite sports, the being football, real football, not American tackle football, and basketball.
Soccer, as they call it here.
I think it's going to become dramatically popular in the United States. It
Mhm.
is already by acclamation, which means polls. I don't know if that really is how accurate that is. It's already the second most popular sport among a young audience. So yeah, and I'm back now to American exceptionalism. We have a hard time accepting a sport that we're not the best in the world at, right? We
Mm,
like baseball, and our championship is the World Series. We like basketball because we invented it, which is well on the way to becoming the second global sport. And we like American tackle football for the reasons we talked about earlier.
As you say, there's like obviously there's real appetite for these sports. People are tuning in. And there's also all the new money from gaming, which you guys have been working with, and just from ultra wealthy individuals and sovereign wealth funds and things for complicated reasons. I think buying into sports. Do, I'm curious whether you think is this a salutary force? Is this a bubble that's going to burst? Like, how do you see this flood of cash coming in?
I don't see it as very complicated as long as you're talking about wealthy individuals. I was at a big PE confab, and they were trying to make the economic case for the valuation of sports teams. And they had this chart where the valuation of sports teams had so outperformed the S&P 500, had so outperformed all indexes, and they were marveling at that and trying to make mathematical sense of it. And I said, I guarantee you there is one other line that will almost exactly track to the evaluation of teams, and that is the number of billionaires in the world.
right.
So this is nothing more than wealthy people collecting the most rare things in the world, whether it be paintings, real estate, yachts, sports teams. Now,
Right.
most of those billionaires on that line are men. What do men love better than being the guy in the front row at the game who gets mentioned on television as the new owner of an NBA team, or the guy they show in the booth at an NFL game is there's the owner. And
Right.
Americans have invaded Europe. They own half the Serie A
Mhm.
teams, to half of the English Premier League teams. So that's why the owners are in this. It's the greatest trophy you can have. It's
And a little
public.
disconnected then from the actual business and culture of it, like, doesn't matter, it's just these rich guys playing with their toys over
Well,
there.
I find that they all resist this thesis.
Yes, they all think these are great investments.
And by the way, they have been.
And they become even better investments when you can sell 5% of your team to a private equity guy and drive up the valuation of the asset that you bought 5 years ago as a vanity investment, right? It's like the
Exactly.
value increases because there's demand. There's, like,
Yeah.
capital demand and nowhere to go.
And I would argue that it flips a little bit, meaning the teams have actually become, particularly in the NFL and the NBA,
Mhm.
so expensive that there are not enough billionaires to keep up.
Right.
And some of these
Mm.
billionaires, oh my gosh, and we take a moment to feel for them, they've only got 10, 12, 15, 20 billion, right? There's only a few people who've got 80, 90, 100, 110. It's meaningless to them. They would say it's not meaningless, but it's meaningless to them. It's not meaningless to somebody who has $11 billion and has to
Mhm.
pay $6 billion to own the Washington Commodores. Commanders. Right? So
Right, that's a hit to that guy's lifestyle.
so wisely, the NFL recently approved the ability for PE funds to come in because
Right.
owners have figured out that the trophy portion, you don't need to own more than 50%, and you might not be able to afford to. So they're laying off some of what they own because you still get on television, you still get to sit in the seat, you still get to talk with the coach who pretends to like you, and with the players who just wish you'd get out of the locker room.
Right.
And there are some exceptions, I'm sure, who are charming, wonderful guys that they all want to hang out with, go out on the boat.
And some coaches like Bill Belichick who won't be friends with you regardless. But one of the things that these rich guys are buying is really access to celebrities, which is no longer the rich guy, but is the athlete, right? So talk about that, the kind of decline of gatekeepers, athletes being able to connect with fans on social media. What does all that mean for the fortunes of these teams, these leagues, these billionaires? Are they detaching? Are the incentives becoming unaligned over time?
No, I think they're they're mostly aligned, right? I mean, and I think the most interesting and most important thing that's happened, and I think you really have to give credit to Jay-Z
Mhm.
and to LeBron, is that there has been significant empowerment among artists, athletes, entertainers, that their talent propels them in a position which they've demanded that we must get heard. And
Mm.
also, my hat's off that it was a long, a wasted opportunity for generational wealth among people who do not have generational wealth, who've now created it. LeBron's family is going to benefit from this for years, right? The owners always viewed the players as kind of fungible. The players have accreted their own power now.
Mhm.
It doesn't that make it in a way I like that these billionaires buying the teams, they have less power. The players are closer to being their equals and a lot less like chattel than they used to be. It almost makes it a little more illusory. What are you buying when you're buying a team if really the team is LeBron?
I think that is accurate, but I think so far it's been a kind of negotiated peace. It's kind of been
Yeah.
okay. You'd still like
Mhm.
to own the Lakers, and I'm sure Jeannie Buss enjoys and seems to enjoy owning the Lakers, um, and seems to have understood that she now has to accommodate some things with LeBron. LeBron's going to have a say in who the coach is.
Yeah.
LeBron's going to have a say in who his teammates are, and he has the ability to take all the value he brings to somebody else. So yeah, the power dynamic has shifted a little bit, though you still own the team, you own the team. So you see that play out in that LeBron wants to own a team. Michael Jordan wanted to own a team, and all these other players want to own a team or a piece of a team. And I think that's a good thing. I wish they didn't own so many production companies because then they're competing with me.
Yeah.
But and I wish that I could retire and go, "You know what? What I always wanted to do was be a basketball player. I'd like to try that now. I'd
I
like
think
to."
you should try that. You could
Yeah, do
get
you
Laurel
think
Piano to sponsor you. But then what about the actual content? Do you think, the Tom Brady special on Netflix, The Roast, is gonna go down as one of the top 5 sports events of the year?
Depends on what your criteria for great sports events of the year are. If it is attracting a big audience, yes. If it is the attention it gathered, yes. But those roasts of Dom DeLuise and Don Rickles and Dean Martin and Red Fox once did very good numbers. Were they good? No, they weren't good. Was that roast good content? If measured by the number of people it attracted, yes. But
Yeah, and the number of new people it attracted who would otherwise be tuned out of sports.
I'm happy.
well, thank you for
And
keeping the standards high, John.
I cannot speak of it very deeply because I didn't watch it.
You didn't watch it? Yeah,
No.
I
Do you have more than 24 hours in a day? 8,760 in a year? Because I don't.
I no, I ended up watching it because I went to a dinner party and, the Gronk was there, Robert Gronkowski was there,
Uh-huh.
and I didn't know who he was, and I was made to feel like a real I kind of knew him, and we had a mutual friend in common, Peter Schrager, but I did not know who the Gronk was, and Ben is now gonna correct me and tell me it's not the
I think it's
Gronk.
just Gronk.
Yes, it's just Gronk,
But
and so then I watched the Netflix special, and I understood who he was, so that was the lead generation for that. It gets
What
people in who aren't watching football.
Well, look, it also, if you're talking about the 5 sporting events of the year in the zeitgeist,
Mhm.
that's why you watched it. You now know who
Yeah.
Gronk was.
Yeah.
You have the opportunity at some point in your life to sort of not care about what the zeitgeist care about. I'm not spending a lot of my time on TikTok. And by the way, I'm not dismissive of it, but I don't need to personally know everything that's going on. It's okay with me.
I mean, the
Mm.
zeitgeist in this country over the last, decade has been pretty troubled. Do you feel like, I mean, and it seems to me there's some sense in which sports is a retreat from that, and the hours spent consuming sports or hours spent kind of getting away from public culture or something, or from politics. Do you correlate those things?
I used to say that if you go to a focus group, which I'm happy to say I no longer ever have to do again in my life, and you have 12 guys behind that one way mirror, they are awkward. They don't know what to say to each other. Guys are just not that comfortable. Hey, how about that sweater you got on? Hey, what's the best restaurant you've been to lately? At some point, what somebody will timidly say, hey, did you watch the game last night? Were you watching the tennis last night? It is a safe subject in a world where you're not going to say, do you hate or love Trump? Or do you think Kamala Harris is a fraud or a savior? Uh, I don't even want to have that conversation because you don't change anybody's mind. Everybody comes in, but you can have a reasonable conversation about Tiafo played last night. What did you think?
Right.
Is he going to beat Taylor Fritz or what? And that's a
Yeah.
safe space for men. I'm not suggesting that men and women are from different planets at this point, but
Mhm.
it is still a characteristic I think is more male driven than female driven.
Or a lot of the trends that we're talking about here, this kind of the rise of the celebrity, the desire for an athlete to own their own name, image, and likeness, even at a college level, the valuation of women's sports, those are bringing some of these political, cultural issues that people want to avoid into the arena. And one of the fascinating pieces of data that our producers pulled in this episode was that of Republicans who don't follow sports, a quarter of them identified the reason for not following sports as feeling that they had become too political over time. Presumably, that these issues of identity, these issues of politics, these issues of virtuous, of what's right or wrong, morality, have come into sports in a way that is taking away in their opinion, from the purity, the sanctity of that American exceptional support. What do you think of that?
I think you're, among other things, looking at somebody who ended up in the crosshairs of this discussion for a while.
Yes, I do. I know that.
I did agree to give Caitlyn Jenner the Arthur Ashe Award, which
Mhm,
was not universally popular. I'm still proud of the gesture, while
mhm,
not particularly admiring the recipient. But the idea that sports can be a complete separation from the rest
mhm.
of life and society is silly. It
Yeah.
matters. You're going to have to figure out, Colin Kaepernick do something so dramatically inappropriate? I don't think so. He used his
Yeah.
platform to make a protest. You can agree or disagree with it, but that's his right. I happen to have agreed with it primarily.
Yeah.
I think it's silly to suggest that you take politics out of it. By the way, we're talking about the popularity of the NFL. What happens before every NFL game? Well, you probably have the damn national anthem. Not every country plays the national anthem to prove how much they love their country before they start playing. You might have a
Yeah.
flyover, which is a bonding with the military of our
Right.
country. You might well have a color guard come out and march around the field, and people wave American flags, and it's not divorced from politics. The only thing people are complaining about is when you bring issues into sports that I disagree with. I don't want to
Yeah.
see any of this shit in sports because it
Right.
offends me. By the way, they don't want to see any of it in entertainment. They don't want to
Right.
see any of it in their local library.
Mhm.
Right? So,
Right.
we want to take politics out of the library.
Yeah.
Um, they just don't want to see what they don't want to see because we become so polarized. Not that people have views along a continuum. We become polarized that you're either here and everything that lines up here you need to agree with, or here and you got to line up there because it happens on the so-called left and right. I don't personally
Yes,
believe
it
there's
does.
much.
In the left, it's more, do the athletes believe in the things? I still watch Kylie Irving play, even
Yeah.
if he did tweet
Uh,
XYZ. So that kind of conversation,
yeah.
happens on both sides of the equation. You're absolutely
Yes.
right.
It does, um, though I don't believe that there's any significant far left movement in this country. This has always been a centrist country. There is a progressive element
Mhm.
of people, which I happen to be among, and there's a group of people who really don't want things to change,
See,
and
your
who,
Laurel Piano betrayed you there, John.
yeah, I guess.
You are, in
No, no,
fact,
no. I
oh,
am
do you think?
definitely one of the East
You're a
Coast
Prada
New
progressive. A
York
Prada
City
progressive is what I
elitist
call it.
with a bad
Yeah.
accent, um, who
Well,
they probably disdain and think I'm trying to take their country away from them. I actually happen to be a proud American. I
yes.
don't wish to be from anywhere else. I'm not sure I could have. had the path to a good life as
Yeah.
easily as I could have here, and I'm proud of that. So if I get angry at things people say, it's not that I disagree with them. It's just that
Yeah.
they're questioning whether or not it is possible to believe the things I believe and be a patriot. I don't know how we wandered into this.
I don't know how we wandered into this, but I would say I feel pretty good about how I ended up not having grown up here. So I think there are many paths to Laura Piano. Thank you so much for being with us, and also for kind of bringing in the American exceptionalism, the patriotism of it all, because we actually started there with this conversation as well. So thank you very much.
I enjoyed being with you. Nice to see you, and
Nice to see you.
hope to see you again soon.
John Skipper, that drawl, the Laura Piano, it was all working.
Yeah, he's one of the great media characters of our time.
And I have to say that I felt slightly vindicated in being the co-host that took the cultural side of the equation. As we both know, it's both the money and the culture here. But how much of that conversation was around the kind of American exceptionalism, the virtue signaling, the idea of morality in our sports and the politics of our sport? How much of it was actually cultural, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like I mean, it's sort of the nature of these stories, right? There are these nuts and bolts that are about sports
Mhm.
rights, but really the interesting questions that you can get to if you understand them are about these huge trends in society and culture, and yes, that sports is somehow capturing right now.
Yeah, actually, you're making me think as a storyteller, like, and what you're saying, the thing about these stories, like why sports is always such a great story. My favorite films of all time, like involve sports, some kind of social division, and ideally, Denzel Washington. Like
That sounds like a great formula.
that's a good formula. Like whether the sport is debate or football, I think it kind of works, I will say. But it's because sports have that kind of inbuilt story of creative tension. There's going to be a winner, there's going to be a loser, there's going to be a, kind of growing action and a climax and some kind of resolution of that. And so it is just the greatest story of all time. And it's no wonder it has lasted from the Roman Empire to the great pickleball competitions of 2024.
The natural conclusion here is an arena full of people screaming while guys actually murder each other. So
Oh,
maybe
so
it'll
it is
come
like
full circle,
politics, you're
but yeah.
saying? All right, well, let's take a quick break. And when we're back, we're going to cover blind spots, what we've been missing while we've been talking about all these sports. All right, we're back with our blind spot segment, and Max Tani is on holiday, and we have joining us instead Liz Hoffman, who is an amazing colleague of ours at Semafor, covering all things finance and business. Hi, Liz.
Hey guys, I feel like I'm being called up from the farm leagues. This is exciting.
I mean, don't sell yourself short, Liz. You're a top player. We're drafting you from a different team.
I'm thrilled to be standing in for Max. I'll do my best.
We've just been speaking about sports for the last half hour plus. What are we missing in this world right now, Liz?
So there was a fun story. It started like a week ago when Brian Chesky, who's the CEO of Airbnb, gave this speech at Y Combinator, just like the big startup incubator, sort of a kingmaker out there. And it got picked up by Paul Graham, who's a serious venture capitalist. And he was talking about founder mode. So that's kind of the phrase that's been slowly making its way, I would say, across the country for the last week. And the idea basically is that startups should continue to run like startups long after they're startups. That like sort of Harvard Business Review, corporate management, top down, put everything in boxes has kind of strangled the entrepreneurial spirit in Silicon Valley. And it's just like so deeply a Silicon Valley thing to believe.
For a long time, we worship founders. We were, thinking that, maybe Mark Zuckerberg would be a presidential candidate. And instead we saw what happened with them. But then there's a huge kind of turn against founders. And this seems to be a kind of re-embracing of, we are the people that birth these companies. We and only we can create not just these companies, but the growth, the economic contribution, et cetera, that comes with it. Is that what's happening?
There's definitely a political piece to this, which is that crew is in ways that I can't totally figure out why is very front-footed right now. Like Mark Zuckerberg is punching back at the White House. We're taking another look at the Hunter Biden laptop of it all. This idea that like everyone kind of collectively lost their minds and that Silicon Valley was sort of the source of that. What they're basically saying now is it wasn't us. We got this foisted on us by our corporate overlords. The other thing that's going on is that the venture capitalists who have been pushing this adult in the room vibe on founders for a lot of like the last 10 years are starting to look pretty dumb for other reasons right now, which is that they aren't making any money. Like, they can't take any of their garbage companies public. They have not returned their investors serious money for 10 years now. Like, they're all starting to look a little stupid. And I think some of their founders are saying, like, wait, what have we been keeping you around for this whole time?
Is Elon Musk the iconic figure we're all striving for here? And that guy is always in founder mode, right?
Which is funny because he did not found Tesla, which is widely,
Yes.
people are always calling him the founder. If he did not found that, he did not found Twitter, though he certainly acted like a founder when he showed up with that sink and fired everybody. He operates in founder mode only.
Yeah, it's one mode.
Look, it's not a surprise actually that this started with Brian Chesky. He came out of that generation of like Adam Newman at WeWork and Travis Kalanick at Uber, these true founder mode guys that just all got washed out and proved to be very bad stewards of their company. Brian is actually like lasted and I think is really
he's
well
such a good
respected
guy.
and like
Yeah.
you know, you say never meet your heroes, but genuinely seems like a good guy and has managed this company incredibly well.
Well, I'm headed back into the newsroom in founder mode. Watch out.
Oh, that's true. You're unleashing founder Ben.
Well, you know, like it's you can totally just dismiss this as Silicon Valley nonsense, but like occasionally things do escape the lab and they like work their way into mainstream, you know, KPIs, and we all work in sprints now, and like everyone has stand-up meetings, I guess the huddles or have replaced actual meetings.
Well, thanks, Liz, for joining us. Actually, not thank you, Liz, for unleashing Ben in founder mode. What are you going to do with your newfound power, Ben?
I don't know. We'll have to discuss it at the US Open.
We should. All right. Well, thank you for tuning in to Mixed Signals from Semafor Media. Our show is produced by Max Tani, Allison Rogers, Sheena Azaki, Max Toomey, Noah Friedman, and Andrea Lopez Cruzado, with special thanks to Liz Hoffman, Britta Galanis, Chad Lewis, Rachel Oppenheim, Anna Pizzino, Garrett Wiley, and Jewel Zern. Our engineer is Rick Kwan. Our theme music is by Billy Libby. And our public editor is the National Slap Fighting Association. Or actually, maybe it's just Ben, who's in supreme founder mode.
I need to get out of founder mode. I've just published a story midway through this podcast with my byline.
If you like Mixed Signals, please follow us wherever you get your podcasts. And please give us a review.
And if you're watching on YouTube, give us a like and subscribe on Semafor's channel.
And if Max were here, he would tell you to subscribe to the Semafor Media newsletter. But Liz is here, and what would you like them to subscribe to instead, Liz?
Semafor Business, Tuesday, Thursday in your inbox, full of scoops.
Go get those scoops. Thanks, guys.